Yeah, so welcome to today's offensive security course. As usual, I like to make a quick announcement for those of you who don't know me yet. My name is Carsten Tellmann. I work for G-Data. That's an antivirus company located here in Bochum. And we are supporting this course, which basically means we are currently offering an additional evening event where we will serve some food and drinks, and we offer a nice atmosphere there where we can hopefully have interesting talks. And if you are interested in talking to our speaker today a little bit more in detail about this talk or work or in general, or if you want to get in touch with people working in the antivirus company, especially if you want to get in touch with more technical people, all of you are welcome to join us. Here are the facts. Dinner will be ready today at about 6:30. If you have interest and if you have more questions, don't hesitate to come to me after the talk, and I can explain it a little bit more in detail. So, without any further delay, let's enjoy the talk.
Okay, hello. So, I'm the ISO for ePost at Deutsche Post, and I usually run around like this with a shirt, you know, like a dress shirt. But I'm here today more like a hacker. So, a little bit management stuff, but a lot of, I hope, hacker or academia compatible information for you today. So I don't have a slide about me, so let me first tell you a little bit about me. As with most people that are into IT and are like 35, 40, I started off with a Commodore 64, done all the usual stuff, and then went to America to study computer science and then security at Georgia Tech and at Norwich University. Came back to Germany, worked about 10 years as a security consultant, spent the last 5 years of those at Deutsche Post. And in 2011, they asked me if I would like to join Deutsche Post as an employee and take on the position of the ISO, the Information Security Officer, which is the security manager, so to say. So that's where I am. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how things are working on the security management level, and also what I learned during this time and what things I needed, sort of like the crypto toolbox, to come up with to do my job. So the agenda for today: first I'm going to introduce you to information security management systems. What is that? And what are some examples? Then the second chapter is like more of a personal look at that, and that's mostly my personal opinion. So there's be a disclaimer: my personal opinion that does not reflect the views of Deutsche Post. And then I brought 3 focus topics that I'll go into once we're through with the sort of main part of the talk. So, Information Security Management Systems, ISMS in short, they serve the purpose of giving an organization a tool for managing security, IT security throughout their organization, whether it is as an entire company or for specific products, like in my case for the ePost or ePostbrief. And the goal is to minimize IT risks or IT-related risks. So information security management systems are very process-oriented. So it's less about we need to disable this feature or that feature, and more about how can we get better. How can we get better at security, which involves people, systems, buildings, you know, anything that you can exploit, sort of. And so continuous improvement is usually achieved by doing 2 things: audits, in which you learn about your vulnerabilities, and hopefully those vulnerabilities are then addressed. So getting better. And reviews. audits are usually done by external people that come into your environment and look at things and tell you what you're doing wrong or what you're doing good, whereas reviews are more of a self-reflecting approach. So I'm holding security meetings every 2 weeks. A review every once a year or so would be like a question: is every 2 weeks, bi-weekly, is that enough? Is that too often, too frequent, or is it enough if we do it once a month? Are we having the right documents? Are they up to date? So it's more of a like an improvement phase that you're reflecting on yourself. And some of the what I here now call artifacts that such an information security management system produces are requirements that tell people that you are sort of responsible for what is it they need to do. If you're a software developer, there might be development requirements. Don't use that feature, don't use that function. Our technology stack is such and such, whatever may fit the environment. If you're looking at like maybe a printing operation center, those requirements might be different. They might be don't throw away paper waste that have been printed that didn't work out right, where data is being printed on. Don't just throw it out in garbage. Dispose it in a secure bin where it's been shredded or something. So it's sort of the telling people what's expected of them. Then we have processes and procedures, which really aren't artifacts in like the pure sense of the word, but are pretty much documents that tell people on which path they need to take in order to achieve something. So for example, if you have a firewall, you can't just go and change the firewall rules yourself. You need to have a process where someone checks off the change. So introducing like a segregation of duty for sensible actions. And reports can be either things like audit reports, where people like me have topics or issues that they need to be addressed, or it can be reports that go up into other management that can be, you know, like everything's super fine. Oh man, we don't know what to start first with respect to security. Just informing management so that they can adapt their sort of budgeting, etc., or their deadlines in order to meet whatever the organization sets itself as their security baseline. And there are two ISMS frameworks, so approaches to implementing such a system. One is the ISO 27001, which is really an international standard. You'll find that everywhere in the world. And it's a process-oriented framework. Just like I said earlier, it's more about how can we get better, how are things evolving over time, and essentially zero about technology. So you will not find in the ISO 27001 anything that says automatic logout of a user session after whatever minutes. Nothing. It's all about you need to have someone that's responsible for security. They need to work in process phases where, you know, they have to do audits, take the results of an audit, and try to address whatever issues are reported. And then you have the ISO 27002, and that's really sort of the technical companion to 27001. It has some technology agnostic, but technology related controls is what they call, which is something like you have to set a automatic logout of a user session after whatever amount of minutes that you deem reasonable. And then you have a German standard called the IT Grundschutz, so IT baseline protection, from the Federal Office for Security in Information Technology, BSI in German. So, and because it's from a German federal office, it's a German standard. So you go to France, you go to Spain, they really probably don't know what IT Grundschutz is. And IT Grundschutz is roughly based on 2701 in terms of process lifecycle. But it has an addition, and this is really where most of the work that went into IT Grundschutz lives, which are the IT Grundschutz catalogs. So there you have a catalog for a Windows server, for a Linux server, for a Mac OS client, for a BlackBerry, for an iPhone, for a firewall, just whatever you can think of for building, for procedures. They list that in there. And if you want to get a IT Grundschutz certification, what you have to do is you have to go through that catalog and select all the items that are relevant to whatever you want to certify. So for EPOST or EPOST-Brief, we certified our platform. And so we had to go through or certified our platform with IT Grundschutz. And so what we had to do is take our landscape, our environment, and match the catalog against that. And the result is sort of the list that you have to go through and go, OK, check, check, check. Oh, no, we need to do something here. Or maybe even say, well, we do it differently. That's OK, too. We can explain that. Or, yeah, that's not implemented as the IT Grundschutz catalog says, but we're fine with that. And our management accepts any risk that may arise from that. So one interesting note is that it's roughly based on 2701, but not exactly. So IT Grundschutz is not sort of ISO 2701 certified. So if you have a IT Grundschutz certified environment and a customer or whatever, whoever asks for ISO IEC 2701 certification, you can't really say that you're compatible with that. You know, 99% you are, but there are some specifics that aren't. So those little rough edges is what the BSI is currently working on the IT Grundschutz in order to have the IT Grundschutz a compatible implementation of ISO 2701 that brings on additional details. So in 2701, you have 11 domains. Security policy, that's sort of, you know, requirement, policy, what is sort of expected of people. You might have a security policy for changing a firewall, which actually would be more of a procedure, but you might have a policy for operating with like a mobile system, like a laptop. You know, don't use it when you're in an internet cafe or whatever might be the allowed or forbidden cases. Organization of information security is about defining roles. So usually what you have an information security officer, ta-da, or maybe even a multiple hierarchy where you have multiple information security officers and one chief information security officer. So I'm the information security officer for EPOST, and within the logical hierarchy, I report to the chief information security officer at Deutsche Post. And then there are other information security officers in other fields, so to say, at Deutsche Post. Asset management is about knowing what you have. So it's usually called a configuration management database, which is essentially a list of servers, switches, networks, firewall rules, buildings, personal, like everything that you need to manage in order to achieve security. Human resources security is essentially about hiring and firing people. So when you fire someone, don't fire them and then forget to revoke their access credentials. Revoke the access credentials, then fire them, right? Physical environmental security, I think that doesn't need any explanations. Just as communications operations management, which is really about what happens if a vulnerability is published and a patch is available for whatever technology. Someone needs to be in charge of, by definition of role, watching out for vulnerabilities, for patches, bringing it into the operations department so that they can be installed. Access control, who has access to what. And also in terms of developing an organization, what are the procedures to buy a new server, to install a new server, to get new firewall rules installed, etc. And then there's security incident management, which is about handling something that went wrong. So if you do all this stuff, it's inevitable that something will happen. You will find maybe a USB drive where you have some sensitive information on it. Someone else might find a USB drive that's not a USB drive, or at least not a clean USB drive. So that needs to be handled, and that's all what this is about. And business continuity management is about continuing your business when something is not available, like your data center burns down. Do you have a second data center? What about your headquarter or your operations center burns down? Would you know where to put like the 300 people that you employ? Would they be all scattered in internet cafes for the next 5 months? That's what you think about in this area. And last is compliance, which is really mostly about legal requirements. So like data privacy, data protection in Germany, Datenschutz, am I even compliant to such legal requirements in doing what I do? Which can be, in our case, like the product. So do I have a valid contract with our users? Is it okay if we use certain data for statistical analysis? All that needs to be taken care of. So that's what compliance is really about. And then you have other standards in the 27,000 series. 2702 just said, which is really about controls that are not product specific but generally applicable. Then you have 2703, which is sort of helping you how can you implement best practices for such an information system, information management security system. So and then you have 2704, which is about measuring. So just like a very basic question, I have 100 security incidents this year. I have 150 next year. Is that better? Is that worse? Am I getting worse because there are more? Or am I getting better at identifying incidents? And maybe the first year I even had 20,000, of which I identified only 10,000. And the next year I have maybe 20,000, I identify 15,000. So how do you measure things? And that's not always just a white and black sort of approach. And the last part is security risk management, which is about identifying, classifying risk into categories. So it's about what is the cross-site scripting? Is that critical? Is that high? Is that moderate? Whatever classifications you have. So it sort of helps you say, okay, that's about the right category. And I presume that most of you think, okay, well, that's pretty obvious. You wouldn't need a standard, right? Is that sort of the way you look at that? Some head nodding? None? You awake? No? Okay. So believe me, and I'll get to that later, these things are needed. So with IT Grundschutz, you sort of have the same things, but instead of running through the same things, I wanted to give a little different approach, because the main process with IT Grundschutz in terms of documentation is going through these phases. So you first define your scope. What is it that I want to apply IT Grundschutz to? Is it my whole company? Is it a certain product? Is it a location? What is it? Structure analysis is about getting all the things that are relevant. Buildings, people, systems, firewalls, whatever. Protection requirements is about determining what is the level of sensitivity that this piece of whatever or this object has. Is a firewall more protect worthy than a backup server, or is it the other way around? So you need to define those things in your protection requirements. And all that is then documented sort of in the modeling. So you essentially have a documentation of whatever is in your environment, which again includes people and things. And then you do one of the probably more involved steps. You run baseline security checks. What you do is you now have your landscape that you have sort of listed according to the IT Grundschutz criteria, like a server, a client, firewall. And now you apply the catalogs, the IT Grundschutz catalogs. You say, okay, I have a Linux server over here. What are the security checks I need to do? Let me look at the component in the catalog that says Linux server, and it has a list of requirements. It says turn off telnet, whatever, da da da. And then you go through that and you document, okay, check, check, check. We need to do that. Okay, it's completed, check. We could do that, but that's a whole lot of work. We'll just skip that one. You have to then say, okay, I'll skip that one. If you skip something and say, okay, I don't want to do that, you have to analyze sort of your remaining risk. You have to say, okay, so I use telnet in my server environment, and that's bad, but it's not so bad because it's an internal network. So if someone, an attacker, would first have to get into the network, which would be pretty bad by itself, and only then would an unencrypted protocol really be a risk. So you categorize it. And when you have that list, you go to management and say, okay, so here's our risk analysis. We have a risk treatment plan, which says we're willing to change this by summer, we'll never do this, and these things are sort of on we don't know because we don't have any money, but your management, you can give us money. And management then has to either provide resources, time and money, or accept risks. And that's important because accepting risk is, according to IT Grundschutz, something where you actually have to sign a document, and managers don't like to sign documents with risks. They hate that. So when you do that, you have a really strong handle on getting more resources. So, and also with the IT Grundschutz, there are some standards, which are BSI standards, and they pretty much explain in a lot more detail what I just said in 2 minutes. So we'll just go on to the next one. We have some conceptual and some practical issues. So ISO 27001, like I said, gives no technical guidance. Yes, you can sort of use 27002, but even that doesn't help you how to configure your Windows server specifically. So whereas IT Grundschutz, like I said, is not even formally compliant to ISO 20007, which usually within Germany that's no big deal, because IT Grundschutz is usually seen as a far more advanced standard than ISO 27001. And if you're fine with not having it internationally recognized, then that's okay. You can live with that. If you, however, if you have an IT Grundschutz certification and you need an ISO 27001 certification, then it's real easy, because all you have to do is take the ISO 27001 standard, kind of look, okay, what are the differences? And actually there are some guides to help you identify those differences, and then you have to implement those according to 27001, and then you're fine. You can get certified to 27001 then. So going from a 27001 certification to an IT Grundschutz certification is a big step because of the whole IT Grundschutz catalog, etc. documentation. But going from IT Grundschutz to ISO 27001 is pretty easy. And so practical issues, most organizations hate the amount of resources that you have to put into an IT Grundschutz certification or even to an ISMS according to IT Grundschutz, because whether you're being certified or not, it doesn't matter. If you want to do it IT Grundschutz, it says do this, do this, do this. And there's a lot of documentation. I don't have the number really precisely in my head, but I think our IT Grundschutz documentation for the e-post is about 3,000 pages. So that's a lot of work, right? True, most of it is generated from like the software that you use to model and document whatever you have, and then it's printed. But all that information needs to be put into the system. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. And IT Grundschutz has another real issue, which is it's not really up to date. So I think there's like a preview of Windows 7, but the most current released version of like a Windows client is Windows Vista, and we're at Windows 8 now. So there are things like Mac OS that are just in preview. There's lots of things that are really not up to where technology vendors are. So Windows servers are a good example. Linux systems are a good example because on current systems you have services that weren't existing like a couple of years ago. And of course then the IT Grundschutz catalogs did not even know about those things, and therefore they are not listed. So you cannot go through a security baseline check for maybe a rendezvous service running on a client. So the BSI is working on that, but it's a whole lot of work because you need to they need to work out these requirements or these baseline checks for like everything that's there. So there are a lot of times when you have to say, okay, there's not an adequate module in the IT Grundschutz catalog, so we have to define our own. So probably a lot of organizations that are certified to Grundschutz have their own definition of an model for Windows 7. There must be dozens out there. And the last part is related to the question, okay, so I have a risk, a vulnerability, or something that I cannot address. Like, what is the categorization? Because the IT Grundschutz is really thinking big in terms of, I want to be able to address my sort of small 5-person company, or I want to secure nuclear power plants with that. So what they have is they have 3 levels: standard, high, and very high. Very high is pretty much like risk to life. So nuclear power plants are, you know, very high. And everything else is sort of up to whoever defines the model. So we at the ePost system have quite a few systems, like as in a lot, that are categorized as high in the IT Grundschutz model, and only a few that are standard, like our web server. Standard web server, not the product, website, ePost is great, etc. That's normal. We don't care too much about that. We care about it, but we don't care so much that we would say it's in high. Because in high, you have to take additional steps for identifying risk. You cannot in high just say, okay, it's a Linux server, I have a module here, Linux server, let me just go through that, check, 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 and then you're fine. No, in high you have to go through additional analysis, risk analysis. So for all the product-related systems, processes, people, whatever, we have additional analysis that complement the IT Grundschutz catalog. So now that was sort of the what is it? And that's where I said it's my personal opinion. So you have issues, lots of issues. You have organization. You have a security management which really needs to oversee several units. You cannot just oversee like your development department or your operational department or maybe HR. So it needs to be, you know, in a separate little organizational unit that sort of controls, governs the other units. So you need management commitment in order to do that. If, you know, if I have my little bubble down here and I want to go tell this guy over there to do something, I have to go up the hierarchy chain and then down. And in order to tell him that, for him to actually be obliged to do that, I have to have the management commitment of whoever sits at the top for that hierarchy. And that's very important, because those are the guys who also give you budget. They don't give you budget to yourself, really, but they trickle down budget, and you need to be good friends with those who are up there, right? So now you have a lot of budget, and you might even have a lot of people. Are they the right people? Are they good at what they do? And Deutsche Post for ePost or ePostbrief is just now for their development switching from consultant-dominated to employee-dominated. So sadly for Marcus, etc., and his team, we're letting go some of those people, because whenever we find an employee that's qualified, we can let go of a consultant. That's hard. It's really hard. There aren't a lot of people who are in the industry who are on your standard. And if you work in any sort of like a 20-hour job in the industry right now, you probably have noticed that giving any bigger organization, take any 100 people, and you will have probably at most 5 people who really know what they're doing and know what things, how changes impact other things, how what the risks are, and they may be distributed. So usually you have lots of people that sort of do their job, that understand exactly what they need to work on, but they have no idea how that impacts right or left. And that's why such standards are essential, because also in a lot of security management, there are people who do just that. They look at this at their point, so they say, okay, we need to do internal audits, we need to do reviews, we need to do policies, procedures, etc. But they have no clue about what a cross-site scripting is, what an SQL injection is. No clue. They usually, what they do is they say, okay, company such and such, can you do a pen test for us? Do that. Give us a report. Then they get the report. They say, okay, 5 criticals. What's an SQL injection? I don't know, but I know that it's marked critical. I know that it needs to be addressed pretty quickly. So then it goes, hey, you are head of our development department. You need to fix this SQL injection. I don't know what that is. Well, my guys know. I don't need to know. So it trickles down, and then it ends up, and some guy who has probably an issue in his bug tracker saying there's an SQL injection. So what does he do? He goes to Google, SQL injection. So if I put a backslash in front of that, I'll be fine, right? So it's really about the quality of people that you have. And it's important for the company to have key players, a lot of key players, good people in every sort of department. But from a sort of information security management perspective, it's really important that you have someone who understands the technology as well. And I think Deutsche Post picked me because I'm more of a hacker. Even though I wear a suit, etc., they know I understand technology, and I hope you'll see later, I also know how to explain things to them. So I don't need to explain them what an SQL injection is. I need to tell them someone can pull out all your data. Someone can modify data. They understand that. If a consultant writes a pen testing report, says SQL injection, parameter such and such not escaped, critical, management usually doesn't understand. They see critical, okay, yeah, but whatever. What needs to be really in such reports is, and by doing an SQL injection, someone can download your data, can modify your data, and can also maybe even disrupt your service. So if any of you are in pen testing, try to improve your reports if you aren't already on that level, by explaining to a customer what that means. What is the impact he feels? Because he doesn't fear an SQL injection. He fears what the SQL injection allows others to do. And that needs to be more present in such reports. So, when looking at ISMS, like I said, 2702 and ID Grundschutz, some technological advice, so to say, those are really all about standard systems. Windows Server, Linux Server, Tomcat, whatever, PHP installation. But they have no clue about components that you use, that you develop yourself, that maybe some little known or new component that's like somewhere out on the internet. I don't know, but I think there exists no IT Grundschutz catalog for Ruby, for example. So that's, if you look at like how many servers are there, Ruby has quite a significant user base. So if there is none yet, then the BSI needs to quickly produce one, right? Because only then can people like me go, okay, I don't need to know Ruby, but I have sort of a rough guideline for going through that. Of course, it'd be better if I'd say, you know what, I know Ruby, I know the 10 things that are written in there, make sense, but I know 5 others that make even more sense. And even better would then be if you contact the BSI and tell them, look, you're missing this and this and this in this catalog. So, because they only have a couple of people working on that. So, and they don't know every technology that's out there, right? So, really in consequence, what that means is that non-standard systems, they're installed, that's it. If you have a server that has like some sort of product and the product brings its own Tomcat with it, you can bet that that Tomcat is old as crap, right? Security manager looks at it and says, okay, I don't have any idea what that is. There's no catalog for that. Guys, did you install the latest patch from the vendor? Mm-hmm. Okay, we're fine. Well, you're not if the vendor does not patch Tomcat, et cetera, whatever it brings with it. So you need to pretty much look into what's in there and then apply the same reasoning. And one of the things I've seen over and over in my fairly long career is that often within an organization there are a couple key players, like the one guy, the one Linux guru, right? He's aware of those things. He even says to his team lead, maybe, look, we have that issue over there. You know, yeah, okay, we'll take care of it whenever, you know? If you have some free time, do that. Okay, that doesn't happen, right? So a lot of internal knowledge about that is usually lost. And I pay extra attention to hear whatever someone tells me. So in order for someone to tell me something, they need to presume that I understand them. There'd be no point in explaining someone who doesn't know any technology that the whatever component within such and such server is old, that there's cross-site scripting. They'd be like, okay, I don't know, I don't care. Is it in a report? No, it's not? Okay, I'm fine, you know? So one important thing is getting those people that you have in your organization that are security aware to be able to and for them to see a reason to report it to your security management. So if you're a developer in a company, in a larger company that has lots of departments, etc., your department lead doesn't care. Try to find the information security manager. Tell him or her. And if he or she says, okay, thank you, yeah, I'll take care of it, and something happens, then you know you have someone that you can go back to. If they're like, okay, yeah, send me an email, and nothing happens, then probably they are working just as in the process model does, but there's no such thing as a, okay, yeah, an employee says we have something bad here, unless an incident occurs. An incident is modeled like I think we could do something better here. That's not really something that's defined. So, so I pretty much already told you. So this slide is complications, problems, and the risks, you know, I just pretty much told you because they're directly dependent on the problems. So what are the solutions? And I would like to actually highlight this little piece right here. We don't need hackers in space. We need hackers in security management. Hackers in space would be great, but if you would like to have secure products out there that you actually use, we need hackers in security management. Because then tiny voices of very competent people in your organization, wherever they may be, will be heard. If that's not the case, no improvement. So, what you need to do in order to do your job good as a security manager, you need pretty much unconditional management support, commitment, because security issues are no fun, and managers like to have fun and not to have no fun, and they don't even like to spend money. So you need commitment from them in order to bring up issues that need addressing, and for them to accept those issues in terms of, okay, I need to spend money on that, or I need to spend other resources in terms of like dedicate an employee to this topic. And also important, you need those for all involved Unix, because like I said earlier, if you move up the hierarchy chain and you have someone there who's not in line, then you can't get to the other guy down there. So you need to have support in the entire hierarchy that you sort of govern. So really you can change out employees at a company. Even in small companies in Germany, it's hard. For any bigger company, it's pretty much impossible, because they were hired for a job. By that, the organization deemed someone qualified for the job, and they cannot fire them for being unqualified later. So, and that's a good thing, right? So how will we go from a unqualified in terms of security to a qualified person? We need to give them task-specific knowledge so that they can apply that knowledge to whatever they do in order to do it secure. And the other big thing is essentially dumpster diving or listening into phone calls. You need to tell people to handle sensitive information appropriately. Dumpster diving is old. You would not believe what you will find in any given company in their trash. I would bet you go down here, somewhere there must be trash cans, probably even sorted from trash and paper, because paper can be recycled, so you don't even get dirty. I bet you can go down there and find printouts of pretty much confidential research, protocols. I would bet you probably even find things like pay information. If you wonder what your professor earns a year, you can probably find that in the trash. If not, then the university already has a pretty good approach to that. And the approach is everybody dispose their paper in trash bins that are made for that will be shredded. Unless you tell people that, they will walk by that secure disposal trash bin that shreds paper 100 times. 3 times a day, they walk by it, grab a coffee, go buy it, and never know what that thing is for. You have to tell them. So that needs to be done. And then if you also tell them to not talk about sensitive information on the train, on the phone, at an airport on the phone, then you're pretty good already with that respect. And it's pretty hard, because sometimes you just need to help someone. Someone gives you a call, and it's important, it's urgent, so you kind of need to help them. And it's sort of an art trying to talk to them in a way that your communication partner understands what you're telling them without anybody around understanding. So that's what I have trained myself in the last years. So, and when you have those upper 2 things, you're pretty much on a good way to getting security considered doing development, planning, etc. And if that's not the case, because you just got into the company and they already have a setup, what you need to do if you're a security manager is make eye-opening audits. Go into the basement, go grab in the trash, and show the manager what his bonus was this year. I'll tell you, at that point, everyone will be instructed to put their paperwork in the shredding bins. So, and really addressing issues, risk management, if you have the upper 2, you're on your clear way to getting better, getting good, getting very good. And all of that, my personal opinion, Deutsche Post on top, not their viewpoint, my viewpoint. What else? Yeah, don't overdo it. Don't run for every little thingy to a manager and take their valuable time in explaining that some comment in some JavaScript file has not been removed from a developer for 3 years. Yes, maybe the name of the developer is in the JavaScript file or in the HTML file. Maybe even the URL of your version repository is in there. Is that really so much of a risk in itself? Is that worth going to a manager who has like a million things on his mind and telling them, look, this bug over there has been open for 3 months? No, it's probably not. You need to value these moments in terms of save them up for things that are really important. Because if you go to them 2 or 3 times, tell them, look, this comment has not been removed and whatever. At some point, he will try to ask someone he has that's a techie and ask them, okay, so the security guy comes over every 2 days and tells me I need to instruct someone to do that and that. What is that? What is the risk? And the techie will tell him, that's lame. Don't worry about that. And by that point, you have lost your credibility for real issues. So assess what's really necessary. And that's for sort of management. Employees, same thing. Yes, I walk around in the building and every time I see an open laptop without someone at the laptop, little note, lock the desktop, thank you, right? I don't go in there and delete their files, read their emails, send out Twitter messages, whatever. No, because then A, I would get in trouble, and B, that'd be unprofessional. And probably most likely C, they will hate you. And you do not want people to hate you. You want people to like you in security management. And therefore, the next point is really important. You need to help people with their problems, if you can, even if they're not security problems. So if someone has an issue with their Windows systems, and you hear it, in the coffee kitchen, whatever, tell them, hey, I know the solution. Let me go. We'll fix it. It takes 2 minutes. I'll fix it. That person will be so grateful. The next time, they will really involve you early. They will say, hey, Jürgen, we want to do that and that. Yeah, that's 2 months down the road, but I wanted to tell you just now. So you're not overwhelmed by, look, we need to go live in 5 minutes. We need your okay, right? So really building up like a favor base really works for you. Trust me. So that's it for information security management systems. Now we go into 3 topics that are directly relevant to my work in the last 2 years. And the first one is teaching people about things they sort of should know, but most likely don't know. And in this case, it's cryptography. You all know what cryptography is in very good detail, so I don't need to explain to you. But you will run across the situation where you have to explain it to someone else. Maybe your mom asks, what is it you learned in university today? Cryptography, what is that? Yeah, encryption and stuff. Okay. No, you can explain that to them so they understand. So I was in the same situation. I was asked, so how does cryptography work? I said, okay, we'll sit down at some point and I'll demonstrate. So this is the crypto toolbox right here. What we have is we have a message, and it's from Bob, and Alice is the recipient. And what it has is a secret combination in it. If I send the message to Marcus, it will pass through everyone in here, and everybody could take a log, right? So encryption. So what we can do is we can use the symmetric encryption, which are locks like these. They're pretty cheap, like in real life, but as you know, they're also computationally pretty cheap symmetric compared to asymmetric encryption. So what you have with these locks is you have to take a key and you actually have to lock it, right? So we now encrypt the message. And I could send the message off to Marcus. The question remains, how do I get the key to Marcus? Same problem. Okay? So then I'll tell them, okay, so besides the symmetric encryption, what we have is we have asymmetric encryption. And Marcus is really Alice now, so sorry. So what we take is we take Alice's public key. These kind of locks, you can just lock them without a key. So what we do is we take this key right here, put it on the message, and now I can send this message off to Alice, and no one else, you don't need to pass it back, no one else can take a look at the code, right? Yeah, side channel attacks. Okay. Did everyone get the concept? Okay. So that's how you can pretty much explain to everybody what encryption is. And really, it's pretty accurate. If you think about like anything PGP, S-MIME, whatever you take, that's pretty much how it works at this level. So now Alice wants to know whether the message is actually coming from me. So now we have digital signatures, right? So I'm Bob, and I have a pair of Bob scissors. They have a unique cutting pattern that you know from like children's play. And of course, this is not unique, but it's just to demonstrate the purpose, right? So I could mark the message and thereby demonstrate that it's from me. The message can be any size, so it's impractical to mark a message that's any size. So what we do is we use a helping mechanism, which is hashing. So what we do is we calculate the hash of this message, which is in this case just fairly simple, the sum of the, not the digits, but the numbers. So in this case, it's 55. And then we have a small piece of paper, and that we mark with the scissors. So now we can put this to the message, send it off, and now Alice has a way of validating whether that message is authentic by opening the message, by calculating the hash value, and by taking Bob's verification pattern, seeing, okay, it matches. And of course, it's important, where does such a pattern come from? Well, the answer is pretty easy. There's a directory that says this is Bob, and you can download a copy of the verification pattern, or you can download a copy of the encryption log, so the public log. And I guarantee you, everyone will understand that. So explaining cryptography, if you have about 25 euros at hand, easy. And that box has seen quite a bit of use, trust me. So this is just for later, the box itself again. So I presume the slides will be available later. You can get pictures in there. Next topic. And we're jumping. So these are just 3 topics relevant to my job, and picked randomly, more or less random because they were topics that I already had slides for. So secure session data storage. So what you have is you have a lot of web applications nowadays, and a lot of them handle sensitive data. Credit cards, health information, e-post with messages, etc. And you use session, HTTP sessions to manage user sessions. Problem, session data on the server resides somewhere, and it's usually unencrypted. So if you go into like a memcache daemon, get a list of all session IDs in there, download all the session data that's in there, you have everything you need to know about all currently active users. You can take a session ID, put it in a browser, whoop, you're that user. If you don't want to do that, you can just look, oh, look, there's a field credit card. Oh, you use Jürgen Pabel's credit card number, I have it, okay, right? So that information needs to be protected. So, and this right here is a concept that we developed. So the idea is to secure this information that's, you know, not permanently, but temporarily stored on the server associated with user sessions. And what we've done is we've done an encryption using the session ID itself. So the browser holds the session ID just as before. And a module in your application server manages whatever session data needs to be handled with that session ID. So what it does is takes the session ID, runs it through a hash. That's your encryption key. With that, the session data itself is encrypted before it's stored. In order to locate that data later on in a database, whether it's memcache or a file system or whatever, you need an ID, a primary key. It'd be dumb to use the encryption key, because then you have the encryption key and the encrypted data ping, right? So what we do is then hash another time the encryption key, and that's our storage ID. So this is oversimplified, because there are a couple more details involved, but that's the idea. Now, only during the time of a request can someone extract the ID, the session ID, and then extract the data. So if the session IDs is not actually protocoled somewhere, like in a log file or so, then someone would actually have to trace, debug the application server in order to get to the data, because it's encrypted in the session storage database, and the server probably does not give you whatever data has been in there. Maybe you get like user Jürgen Pabel logged in, okay, but you probably don't get user Jürgen Pabel logged in, session ID A, B, C, D, E, F, right? So what are some of the complications or cryptographic requirements? So data is encrypted using a block cipher, and you need a initialization vector for block cipher modes. Problem is that most block cipher modes require a specific attribute for the initialization vector, in that they are every time different, non-deterministic. There are some others in terms of like having like a high Hamming weight between two different initialization vectors, but those are, you have to sort of look at what specific requirements your block cipher mode has. So the idea here is that PHP SSDS, which is the open source implementation of this, it, instead of randomly generating an IV for each operation, because each encryption operation would need a different IV, you change the data in the data storage, need to newly encrypt, can't reuse the old initialization vector. So what it tries to do is, instead of for every operation get something from the kernel, because that would drain the entropy pool really quick, the idea is to calculate an initialization vector that's not really predictable, that has the requirements or fulfills the requirements that certain block cipher modes require. So the idea is to concatenate the current time with the actual session ID, then run that through the hash, and there you have it. The next operation will happen at another time, different millisecond or microsecond. It'll produce an entirely different initialization vector. So probability of very high Hamming weights, very good. With PHP SSDS, the implementation is so that you can configure every cryptographic algorithm in the config file. So key hash is for deriving the encryption key from the session ID. SID hash is the storage ID, so deriving from the encryption key to the storage ID. IV hash is the hash for calculating the IV. And data cipher is the encryption mode for encrypting the actual session data. And with PHP SSDS, everything that's OpenSSL supported works in here. So if you say I want to use AES CBC, fine. All you have to do, if you want to change it, change the name of the algorithm in the config file. Of course, if you change it during runtime, your old data will not be readable anymore because the whole mapping goes away, right? So changing that at runtime, no, not a good idea. Setting it to reasonable values at startup is a good idea, and the defaults are secure. So this addresses a common problem of an attacker accessing data on the server that exists at runtime. And PHP SSDS is open source. It's php-ssds.sourceforge.net. This is relevant to my work, but this actual implementation is my personal hobby, so I implemented this. It's published by me as a private person. I got the OK from Deutsche Post to use that concept, to implement it, or implement it as open source. My next step will be to get it included in PHP by default. They told me, okay, yeah, that'll be fine. All we need you to do is write some unit tests, which I haven't done in like half a year. So as soon as I write some unit tests that they're happy with, you will see this in PHP, which will probably be in a year or so. And my next my next step for this is then to implement it in Tomcat, or maybe Getty, or any other Java-based application server, so that it doesn't only exist for PHP. Because no, I don't like PHP actually, but it's so easy to write an extension in it. So yeah, you work what you got, right? So the last topic is Security Cup. I know we have a couple people here that are participating in the Deutsche Post Security Cup. Can I see hands, please? If you would like, you don't have to. Okay. So who does not know about the Deutsche Post Security Cup? Is there anybody? Okay. So Deutsche Post Security Cup, I don't have any slides, by the way, because the slides I just created on the train here, on the way here. So they're literally like 2 hours old. And I didn't have enough time for the Security Cup slides. So Deutsche Post wants to establish the E-Post or E-Postbrief as a secure communication and transaction platform for just everybody. So it's important that we A, provide a secure service, B, make it easy to use, and C, have others confirm, hopefully, that we are secure. So what we do is we do security management internally, we do an IT Grundschutz certification, we have a TÜV IT certification, and we have a Datenschutzgütesiegel certification, so data privacy. And those all are really well received by business people. They say, okay, we know that, we know what you have, okay, it's all good. I understand that you guys would say, well, there's a bunch of people doing paperwork and afterwards it's secure. No, well, it might be, but you don't really know. You can actually have any sort of certification and be pretty bad at security. It's just about having the mechanisms in place, not about the factual current level of security that you have. The only thing that it says is that you have a really minimalistic baseline and that you're getting better. So with the Security Cup, which should really be named E-Post or E-Postbrief Security Cup, but Deutsche Post Security Cup just sounds better. So we named it Deutsche Post Security Cup. And we had our first Security Cup, which is a hacker challenge, in 2010. And what we did is we invited teams to participate, then selected, I think it was back then, was 14 or 16 of the best teams that we deemed best. And we had a jury back then, and Thorsten was one of the jurors back then, so he also selected the teams. And he was part of the jury that actually scored submissions. So a team came by and said, well, we have here a Drupal 0 day, and we submit that to your competition. We look at that and say, yeah, that's pretty good, but we don't use Drupal. So we tell the jury, look, we don't use Drupal. And the jury said, 0 points, go home. Take your 0-day vulnerability, go somewhere else. Right? So what we do is we have first a team of E-Post experts, essentially our security pen testing team, that first sort of validate a submission for correctness, for applicability, and do a pre-scoring. So this is sort of the rough baseline that they give then the jury with an explanation about why did we score a submission with a certain score, with maybe no prize money, €1,000 prize money, 3,000 or 5,000 prize money. The jury then looked at that, and if they were fine with it, they say, okay, check. If they disagreed, then they were free to change the scoring completely. And this year we're doing the competition again. It's running right now, so it started April 29th, and it'll be over with on June 30th. And the Roni Bochum has 2 teams participating, Team 1 and Team 2. And then there's a third team that's actually participating that has another name that consists in part of students from Bochum. So it's pretty good represented. in the cup this year. And the reason, one of the prime reasons, is that the University of Bochum won the Security Cup in 2010. And so from the teams that we had that had registered themselves for the contest this year, we picked those that we figured were good. There was a team 3. Team 3 didn't make the cut for MOB, but team 1 and 2 did, as well as the other team. So, and it's pretty much fair game. So what we're doing there is we're like letting teams run in rounds in terms of first round is our portal. Second round is e-post-ident, which is like an identifying service, like think of OpenID in commercial maybe, a little bit like that. And the next round will probably be, I'm not sure because I've been just a week on vacation, but I think the next round will start next Monday and it'll be our iPhone and Android app. So we're letting them go step for step. And at the end, scores are summed up. We'll see who won it. There will be a award ceremony. And of course, prize money that teams earned will be paid. And it's fun. It's really fun. I bet it's fun to be on the other side. But let me tell you, it's fun to be on this side too. Because you don't have to do any hard work. All you have to do is get these submissions, say, hey, that one is cool. You know? So, yeah, and that actually, the Security Cup is something that we can actually convince people who are critical of the security at e-post. We can somewhat convince them. You know? Maybe we can't convince everybody because, well, say, well, I haven't been selected, I didn't participate, I would have hacked the shit out of it. But those that we did select, I'm pretty sure they will testate at the end that it was pretty tough earned money. So that's part of our strategy of demonstrating to the outside that we're doing a good job. And we're in that part, we're doing especially a good part because we have consultants that have been here at the university that have worked and work for our pen testing team. And as soon as we find people that are willing to work as an employee, as an employed pen tester, we'll have employees, right? I told you in the beginning, we have a high percentage of consultants, and that's because it's really, really, really hard to get a good pen tester to get them to work as an employee. That's fine. You know, we are willing to pay consultants for a pen testing team for as long as it takes. Whenever we have 10 employees that can do pen testing at that level, we won't need consultants anymore. But that's part of the management commitment that you need to get good security. Management, if you just look at the numbers, they'd be so itchy to just cut that number. Why do we need 10? Can we do it with 2? You know? And that's the controller, right? He's trying to save money. And then you need a manager who says, no. Why don't we take just a little bit smaller stand at the CeBIT and we keep those guys because they help us. And that's what you need people, management, to be committed to. Without that, down the drain. If you decide to go work in information security management, you have a management that's not supporting you, as in what you do as a security manager, or even as someone in development who says, I have a vulnerability, we need to fix this, and no one listens. My advice is, find some other job. It's not worth your time. And the reason why I decided to become an employee of Deutsche Post was that I saw that they take security serious. And that's really the reason why. So that's it for my presentation. Would you like to ask questions?